Chad's National Inclusive Dialogue Conference kicked off in Germany on Saturday, August 20, after a move which meant to pave way for the country's long-awaited elections and restore peace. The opening ceremony, chaired by the head of the military government, General Mahamat Idris Deby, was regarded as a decisive moment for the nation. The talks last for 3 weeks, are scheduled to allow over 1,400 delegates from the government, civil society and some opposition parties, as well as groups to discuss peace and new constitution, as well as a reform of institutions in the fifth largest African country. The opening ceremony of these important decisive moments in the history of Chad saw the boycott of some key opposition figures. The event had been postponed several times and was made possible by after the signing of a deal between the military government and around 40 groups on August 8 in Doha, Qatar. It is worth noting that this deal was earlier rejected by two of the biggest rebel groups in the Central African nation. Nonetheless, these talks are meant to pave way for elections promised at the end of October, and will recall that General Mahamat Idris Deby, who took over from power in April 2021 after his father's demise, vowed to organize free and democratic elections at the end of his 18-month transition. On today's edition of Voice It, we shall be analyzing the opening ceremony of the National Inclusive Dialogue that held on Saturday in Chad, and of course we shall be bringing to you with this our distinguished guest joining us all the way from Washington DC, and of course Yaoundé, which is here in Cameroon. Stay with us. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you immensely for joining us on today's edition of Voice It over your Pan-African channel for you media. Today we are discussing Chad, and of course before I get down to unveiling who my guest is this afternoon, I would like to tell you that on Saturday, August 20, Chad held an inclusive national dialogue there in Germany, meant to pave way for the long-awaited elections there in the country. And joining me all the way from Washington DC this afternoon is Dr. GNAKA LAGOKE. He is a Pan-Africanist as well as a political analyst. Good day, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Morning. Thanks very much for the opportunity, Sharon.
You're welcome. Before we unfold, I would like to ask you this question. What overview do you make of this national dialogue that took place in Germany over the weekend?
In general, when Africans are meeting, it's always a good thing. It's always it's a good thing when people in the country who've been fighting for decades, when they can meet and then try to solve the issues. So that's my first reaction. The second thing, I don't think that this dialogue is going to change the conditions or the fate of Chad, as the main objective is about organizing election, even though they're talking about national reconciliation. So I'm not expecting something substantial to come out of this dialogue.
The peace agreement that was signed in Doha, Qatar on August 8, we saw that some key opposition figures, mainly of the rebel groups, did not agree to the terms of this peace agreement. Now we are at the opening ceremony, and of course we want to recall that some key opposition figures did boycott the opening ceremony of this national inclusive dialogue. How would you analyze this? Do you think it's a possible way towards the outcome of this 3 weeks dialogue that is holding the in Chad?
Yeah, so the leader of the transition, the leader of the transition who said that he was going to lead the transition for 18 months, and then at the end of which election will be organized in Chad. We have to know that he is the son of somebody who was in power in the country, and then who somehow, even though he tried to bring a sense of stability, was a controversial leader. That is the first thing. Number two, the conditions of the rise to power of the current president have been decried and by many in the country and in Africa. Chad is supposed to be a republic, but when his son becomes a president chosen by international forces, namely France, and we come to power, then of course this adds to the controversy. And number three, you wanted the dialogue to be an inclusive dialogue. Unfortunately, like you said, several key figures and several key groups in the country do not think that they are involved in the process, or they don't want to be involved in the process. So therefore, we can have an idea about the outcome of the dialogue, which is supposed to be an inclusive dialogue.
So, according to you, you say that he is a son of someone who actually ruled, but then he has been in power and he is the one who brought about this initiative of a national inclusive dialogue that is going to bring together factions of the rebel groups as well as the military government to see how they can put a stop to the jihadist attacks and possible insecurity that has been trending there in the Central African country. So, would you say that he's bringing this, it's some kind of plow or plots because elections are around the corner?
Yeah, my point is that one of the difficulties that we have in Africa is that when people are, there is too much malice and people are not sincere. Usually, when you hear about the national reconciliation, the inclusive dialogue, usually people are not sincere. You can go to Ivory Coast, you can go to Mali, you can go to Chad, you can go to different parts of Africa. You will notice that when people seem to be involved in the process, they want to advance their personal agenda to the detriment of the interests of the respective nations. That's the first thing that we need to acknowledge. So he wants to remain in power, and then he wants to maintain the political system controlled by the French authorities, and then therefore everything that he's going to do, it is not somehow to advance the interests of Chad as a nation. It is to advance his interest, the interests of his family, and the interests of of his clan. So that's something that is very important that we need to look at. Now, if he wanted to be sincere, then there are many people who want him to leave power. So if he leaves power, and that's something that that's not possible. But if he leaves power and he organizes like a real national reconciliation forum, and people come and talk, and then they agree on the platform on a new social contract, now we can see that he was really sincere about what he wanted to do as the leader of the transition. But unfortunately, this is not what he wants to do. And there are other groups, be military, political, or members of the civil society, they too, they want to have access to state power in Chad, and that is also the basis of the tragedy of that country, that is going through an unending cycle of violence and suffering.
Okay, away from that, what do you think accounts for the tensions between military governments or governments of African countries and rebel groups in the continent?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure if I understand.
Okay, yeah, so I was asking that away from that, given the succession part of it, what do you think accounts for the tensions between governments, various governments of different African countries and rebel groups in Africa?
There are several reasons. The most important one is that people are fighting for power. You can hear about those Islamic groups in Mali, in Somalia, everything they're doing, they are fighting for power. Power is the main reason of the tension and the conflict that we confrontation that we see in Africa. There are some groups, they may think that, okay, they want to advance and promote Islam. But if you are really somebody who is fighting for the sanctity of the Islamic religion or for the purity of the Islamic religion, you're not going to go and sell drugs. You're not going to go and rape men and women. You're not going to do all those things that are forbidden by any religion in the world. But yet they say that they want to promote jihad, they want to conduct those holy wars, but at the same time they are doing things that are forbidden by the religion. So my point of view is that it is not about religion, it is about power. So that is the first thing. And number two, one of the reasons why people fight in Africa is that there is no fair distribution of resources. When you have a group of individuals in power, they want to control state power, they want to control the resources, and if you are not part of the clique and you are not part of the clan, therefore you are excluded, from the distribution of the resources. And that's why some maybe as members of ethnic groups, of social groups, of political groups, or some religious groups, they organize in order to come and attempt to take control of the state in order to be in charge of not only state power, but also the resources of the country for the benefit of their respective constituencies. That is reason number two. Reason number three, we have the interference of the West. As we know, the tragedy of Africa is that the Europeans do not want African countries, to be self-sufficient, despite the flaws that we have, and then they don't want them to become to engage in the process of self-determination. And therefore, if there is a leader who is trying to do the right thing, we will see the Europeans. They're going to go and arm the opposition or other groups in order to go and attack whoever is going to be in power and who is not doing or is not serving the interests of the Europeans. So there are several reasons, and I just wanted to mention those three.
Okay, Doc. Just to recall that over the years, Chad has been fighting rebel groups, and we just want to recall that it's because of this fight against jihadist attacks, rebel groups, that led to the death of the former leader. Now, what do you think the Chadian government can do in order to put a final stop to these attacks?
It is a difficult question because I had the opportunity to listen to the interview given by the widow of the former president of Chad, Abre, when she was denouncing the exclusion that I'm talking about. But the difficult thing is that if I come and I say that people need to try and have like a political solution, maybe it can work. Maybe people need to defeat those jihadists, because there are some who do not want to engage in a process if they are not in charge of the process. So if there are some people who want Chad to become an Islamic nation, so what do you do with those groups of people? One day, President Obama was talking about Dr. King, and then he was talking about how King was an apostle of peace. And then he said something that I agree with, is that how can you talk about peace and non-violence when you have some armed groups like Al-Qaeda who come and who try to kill innocent people? Of course, I know that they're certainly reacting to the policies of the United States that have undertaken wars in other parts of the world. But the question is, how do we negotiate with people who think that the only way for them to survive or to live is to be in power and impose the Sharia law or the Islamic law in the country? So this is what I can say about the situation in Chad.
Okay, we have seen cases. Let's take a look at the Rwanda DRC case with the issue of the M23 rebel groups. They did reject the deal that was equally signed because they felt they were not part of the dialogue that held between both leaders. We're talking of President Felicia Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame of Rwanda. Now, how do you tame all this? Do you think that in as much as technology have come to make sure that every person that constitute a balanced dialogue is included, the other measures that could be put in place? You earlier mentioned that most of these leaders or most of these rebel groups don't want to actually dialogue because they feel that is because they are dialoguing with people that are there just to consume power. So what do you think needs to be done?
No, I think that the primary thing that people need to do in Africa, it is about fairness. You know, it has to be about fairness. It has to be about inclusion. It has to be about consensus. It has to be about a new social contract. It has to be about a wide participation of various constituencies in the affairs of those African nations. So I think that if we do this, this is how we can reduce now the tension in the society. I live in the United States of America. Of course, America is far from being a perfect place. When they have issues that they did not want to resolve because of white supremacy or because of racism, America went to war. There was a civil war in the United States from 1861 to 1865. And then even after the war, there were some racist groups that did not want the inclusion of blacks here. And there were several generations of black people and then white people who fought together in order to end segregation. And it is after that, even though we can see police officers killing people, but we can at least assume or acknowledge that here in this country, many constituencies agree on the fundamentals of the American nation. And this is some of the things that we do not do in Africa. When Alassane Ouattara comes to power in the name of the Charter of the Northerners in Ivory Coast, and because firstly, he believes that the Northerners were discriminated against, and he wants to impose the will and the rule of the Northerners to the detriment of the Southerners. What do you think is going to happen when Alassane Ouattara is not in power anymore? Somebody may come to power from the South, and the person may be willing to maybe willing to impose the will and the rule of the Southerners. And this is what we've been doing. I'm going to give you an example, another example. I'm going to talk about Kenya. Kenya, they organized elections, and then the vice president, William Ruto, won the election. Yeah, William Ruto is believed to have won the election. But what are we seeing in Kenya? Based on my research, based on the conversations I had with people in Kenya, even though Raila Odinga is not one of my favorites, but at least we know that there was some time when Odinga won election in Kenya, and then of course they did not give him the opportunity to become the president. And he's a Luo, it's a minority group. And now in Kenya, since the independence of that country, only 2 ethnic groups have been ruling Kenya. 2. We have the Kikuyu, and then we have the Kalenji. And then it looks like there is like a conspiracy of those 2 ethnic groups to come together in order to rule the country, forever. So for me, that way of doing things, it is not sustainable, and it's not going to be good for Kenya. And sooner or later, somebody may be justified, to go and take weapons in order to cause a civil war in Kenya. So this is another example. And then I think that the time has come for Africans to understand that they need to build a new social contract, reduce the dissension in the society, and not look at the interests of some to the detriment of others. But they have to come together as one. Nelson Mandela tried to do that in South Africa, and this is a positive example that I wanted to give.
Okay, so given this inclusive dialogue, you've given a lot of elaborate examples. What lesson do you think other African leaders can take from this move made by the Chadian government in order for peace to reign? We're not just looking at it in Chad, but we're looking at it for at a global perspective, looking at peace restoration on the African continent. What can other African leaders learn from this?
The first thing that they have to learn is that what is happening in Chad is not a good model. That's the first lesson. Yeah. The second lesson is that if there is an example that is that we can say is a positive one, is that of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. Even that one, I've seen some friends who think that it could have been perfected, it could have been better. So the point is that we cannot continue. We have already so many challenges in Africa. We have the Europeans who are coming back again, engaged in a new race to take advantage of the division that we are causing, or they want to take advantage of the division that they're causing in order to continue to exploit our resources. And then what we need to do is to reduce the dissensions in the African communities. It means that we need to have selfless leaders who are going to try and do the right thing, for the betterment of the communities. What does it mean? We know that if you exploit people, it's not a good thing. We know that you cannot impose the will of one group over the other groups. We know that you cannot just take advantage of the resources, for one group, and then you're not going to meet the needs of the masses. So these are things that we need to do, and people have to understand that in the 21st century, Africans are fighting for a new independence, and it means that the question of sovereignty, of political and economic independence, have to be in the central part of all conversations and all dialogues people may undertake on the continent of Africa.
There's a statement that the young generation are the future of tomorrow. Now we are seeing a case where in Chad there is the son of a former leader, and he is a young generation. What message could you give out to the young generation regarding peace restoration, given that you already spoke about African leaders? How can we as a young generation restore peace to this continent?
First of all, it's not so much about age, because he is young, and then he's doing the old politics of neocolonial, he's advancing neocolonialism. Then he came to power thanks to neocolonialism, and then he's therefore there to advance. Certainly, he may want to do the right thing, but because of the collusion that he has with the French, then he seemed to be doing what many founding fathers did in Africa, Houphouët-Boigny, Bongo, and many other leaders. So again, when he gives the example of Nelson Mandela, who came from prison at age 71, and then he understood that what was at stake was more important than his personal glory. And then he did what he could do to reduce the dissension between black people and then the Europeans, and also between the Zulus and then the Xhosas in South Africa. So it's not about age, it's about vision. When you have a vision of a prosperous Africa, a vision of shared prosperity, a vision of inclusion, then you do everything that you have to do in order to implement that vision. And then you can be old, you can be young. If you have that vision, you are responding to the call of the African people of the 21st century.
Yeah, it's really something that needs to be looked into, because then most Africans, especially the young generation, don't really want to fit into this Pan-African dream, so to say. But nonetheless, I'll not let you go without asking you this question. We know that the National Inclusive Dialogue kick-started on Saturday and is expected to run for 3 weeks. So what are your expectations from the Chadian government, given that though at the start there have been several challenges, but then we can't live without giving our expectations. What do you think needs to be corrected, and what it's okay already?
Oh, but it is it is a wrong start already. So of course, if they tried 1,400 delegates, some people say 1,200, based on the information that I collected.
Yes.
They say that 80% of the people were there are close to the military junta, and then the military, the political and military coalition is not represented. The civil society is not represented. I'm not the all civil society, but some people who really count. And then, of course, it's not a good start. Now, what we can expect, the president or the transition is looking for like a moral and political endorsement from the population in order to give itself a kind of a legitimacy. And then this is what they are expecting, and this is what they're looking for. And then, of course, the election are going to take place. I will be surprised if it does not run. And then if he runs, it means that everything that he's doing, it is because he wants to engage and involve as many people as he can or he could in order for him to have the legitimacy that he's looking for. So I do not expect any miracle from that so-called inclusive dialogue. And then Chad is going to still be in that cycle of violence for many years to come. So if he is strong enough and he can defeat the jihadists, if he can, and then maybe he can bring a kind of peace. But even that, when he does that, he still needs to take into account the needs of all the people in charge, not just for one group, but for the entire nation. And this has to be done based on what? Fairness, equity, shared prosperity, and inclusive participation of all the constituencies in charge.
In line with the best for just the Chadian people, in line with peace restoration in that Central African nation, what do you think is the way forward?
In the Central African Republic, again, the conversation is of course, we may be different in Africa. We may have different things that we do differently, but we have the same problems. And because we have the same problems, that's why we think that Pan-Africanism is the solution. And then we think that when we see what is happening in the Central African Republic, when we see what is happening in Mali, when we see what is happening in Burkina, in Guinea, in Ivory Coast, in many other parts of Africa, we think that the time has come for people in Africa to revisit the Pan-African vision. We may adjust a few things, but our forefathers, Kwame Nkrumah, from Kwame Nkrumah to Nelson Mandela, Samora Machel, Amilcar Cabral, Thomas Sankara, all those leaders, they have tried to do the right thing. It is time for us to go and then learn from what they were doing in order to try and solve the problems that we are facing today. But the lesson number one that we have to draw from the experience is that it was in unity that people could defeat slavery. It was in unity that people could defeat colonialism. It is in unity that we can defeat neocolonialism, and it is in unity that we can advance and promote sustainable development in Africa. It is in unity that we can reduce the exploitation of Africa by foreign entities. And then when you talk about the unity and the solidarity of African people, you are talking about Pan-Africanism. So that's the way forward. And then this is what we need to do. And we have to advance and promote that Pan-African consciousness. That's why when I see media like Africa Media, For You Media, and Vox Africa, many others who are trying to give the tale of Africa, the tale of resilience of the African people, I commend you for what you are doing. And this is what all of us, we need to encourage and we need to do.
Thank you so much. I must agree that I've learned that the only route to peace in Chad is through unity. Thank you so much, Dr. Nyaka, for joining us on today's edition of Voice It.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you have learned a lot from this, given that it's a political topic regarding the National Inclusive Dialogue that held on Saturday, which kick-started on Saturday in Jamena, which is in Chad, Central African country. Of course, we were giving you detailed analysis into that dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, keep following our programs. I have been NJIX NABESEH for presentation, and of course, this program has been aired over for you media. Of course, up next is Prolongation du Sport with Ngene. Stay in company of our programs.